I'm gonna be working on this hood today, so here's what we got. This is the V2 hood for the Dodge Dart. It comes in that E-coat, which is just like basically a primer, but I'm still going to probably shoot it with primer before I do actually go ahead and paint it. Looking it over, there is a couple of imperfections here. We've got a scratch here, high spot there. Looks like there might be a scratch there. A little bit of roughness on the surface texture here and in a couple of spots. That's what happens when you get aftermarket hood. They don't always come perfect. Not a big deal. I'm gonna go ahead and start prepping this. I have a Scotch-Brite pad. I'm just gonna go ahead, rough up the surface of this whole entire hood and also try to knock down any high spots that there might be in some of these areas like that. And for any of these scratches, I have this glazing spot putty by Bondo. This is great for just like small repairs and minor things that aren't super significant. I'm not gonna bring out the other Bondo can and mix up a batch when I don't need to. To start prepping this spot on the hood right here, I just have some 240 grit sandpaper, just a super small little strip of this. And I'm just gonna take this, get in here, kind of just rough up the surface around this area and make sure that this Bondo does have something to stick to. There's also a couple more spots on like the edges. Like I got a little chip right here, low spot in this corner. So I'll go ahead and prep these and just work my way around, finding any other imperfections so that way I can just give them a quick little sand and we'll fill these. All right, so I've gone around the hood and filled in all the spots, or at least sanded. I've sanded all the spots that I feel like needed a little bit of attention to them. This material actually sands super easily. I was using a 240 grit, which maybe was a little bit too rough for it. You just got to be really careful with it. But you can see all the spots that I touched up. There was a couple small little pinholes too that I took care of. I'm gonna sand this whole thing down completely with this Scotch-Brite pad right here, which also might take care of some of those other smaller pinholes that I can't see. But as far as filling it, there's only 2 spots that I'm gonna fill in. Some of these other spots I was able to sand out, and these are actually pretty smooth, so I'm not gonna bother with any filler. But right here, I'm gonna fill this spot. I wasn't able to sand this down, and I don't wanna sand it down too far. And then there's also, I found another one right in here that I need to fill as well too. I'm just gonna take a very small dab and put it in the area of where I need this. Just like, it'll come off. So that's probably about good for this area. I'm not gonna put a crazy amount on because the more you put on, the more you're gonna have to sand off. And same thing over here in this little crease. If I can find the spot. Okay, just like so. Forgot to mention too, you should probably clean the area before you do apply that stuff, just so it sticks a little bit better. Just use a little bit of acetone on a rag, wipe it off first, and then that'll give you a clean surface for this to stick to. Now I'm just gonna take this little putty scraper that I have and go ahead and just kind of smooth these areas out, so that way it will fill the cracks where the damage is. Now this is what the 2 areas look like, there and there. Give this a couple minutes to dry, probably like 5 to 8 minutes. We're gonna check it, just touch it. You'll touch it with your nail for hardness and see if your nail leaves an imprint when you touch it. We're just gonna take the Brillo pad, go over this nice fine hood of ours here and rough up this surface. You can see this is already making like a matte finish, and that's what you want, so your primer will have something to stick to. Make sure when you're sanding this, you want to do crosshatch pattern, so go one way, and then now we're going the opposite way. So this should smooth out everything and give us a nice surface for that primer. So here we have the back side of the hood. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I feel like I'd be selling myself short if I didn't sand this. So I'm just going to go over this really quickly with just this same Brillo pad as I used on the front side. Just rough up all the surfaces. I'm not worried about any of these pits or imperfections in it because you're hardly going to see this at any point anyways. The back side of this is now sanded. Just went over it really quickly. Moving back onto the front side, everything is sanded over here. This only took a couple minutes to go over with this Brillo pad. Super simple, super easy, went well. and it also smoothed out quite a few of the little pinholes and scratches that there was. So onto this now. This seems to be about good. In order to check it to see kind of where it's at, you're just going to take your nail, poke it, and if it doesn't leave an imprint, looks like it still might be a little bit soft, but it's hard enough for the most part. So I'm just going to take, I have a 320 grit here. I'm not going to go super rough with it because I don't want to tear through it really quickly. I'm just going to try to feather it out and smooth this area out. Same thing with this spot over here. Once that's good, everything should be prepped and pretty much ready to go on this hood for paint. These areas are now smoothed down over here. Pretty happy with them. Everything seems to be pretty smooth to the touch when you go over with your finger. Same thing with this spot over here. There's a couple other smaller pinhole spots that I touched up a little bit. Other than that, this hood is set and ready to go. So this will be ready for paint. I have a couple other parts too that I still need to finish wrapping up. I also didn't do a video of it, but I did a quick one over on the fender. Same material pretty much as that hood. This is just the E-coat. So just take the Brillo pad, scrub it, go over everything, and you want to look for this matte dull finish and just making sure that there's no shiny spots on here. Everything seems to be good with this, so this is also going to be ready for paint too as well. There wasn't any damages on this one that needed attention. I'm getting close to that point where we're almost start ready to laying down some paint and seeing how this color that I got that is the same paint coat is going to match up to the factory paint. This is going to be the very top to the front bumper piece for the Dart. This is the one that was obviously on the car, and I was kind of looking at it trying to see if I could use it. And it did take a little bit of damage from the accident. You can see there's some deer hair right here, and there's a crack that follows all the way up into here. And then obviously this side right here is also pretty shredded too. Now, I thought about repairing it, but I think it's gonna be a lot more work than it's worth. And I do actually happen to have a spare one from one of my previous cars that is in much better shape. So I'm actually probably gonna use, well, I am gonna use this red one right here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and prep this, sand this down kind of the same way as I've been sanding everything else down. There's a couple of little pinholes and pits on here to fill, but there's no cracks or any major damages that I'm gonna need to repair, like this one. I got this set up here on the table. I have a 320 grit sandpaper that I'm just gonna be block sanding it with. It's just kind of what I have right now. Upon further inspection, I did notice that one of these pieces right here, it actually is broken off, so I will need to get in there and epoxy that. Other than that, there's no actual like bends or other major cracks in here. I think once I sand this down, it'll kind of get rid of a lot of these imperfections. So we're just gonna go ahead and start blocking it. All those little Bondo spots on this are all hardened up now. I'm just gonna take my 320 grit sandpaper and a block and just go ahead and start working on these, smoothing them out. It should be pretty easy to take these off and clean these areas up, so I'll do that. And then this will be pretty much set and ready to go for paint, as long as I'll go over again and just make sure there's no shiny spots. What we have here is going to be the old fender from the car that was damaged, and the reason I'm hanging on to it is to see, I picked up some paint and I'm trying to see how it's going to match up to this. Anytime you're gonna buy like aftermarket paint, you don't know how it's gonna match up with the factory paint. So I'm just gonna kind of use this old fender that I have right here. I'm gonna sand an area of this right here just on this side, and I'm gonna practice and see what this new paint is gonna do and how it's going to match up and blend in to the rest of this. So I have a couple other parts on the car that I do need to paint, and hopefully I'll be able to blend this in pretty well. And this paint that I picked up is going to be a decent match is what I'm hoping for. Just for prepping this, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I'm just going to be using just a 320 grit. Actually going to be hitting the whole panel. I'm going to be sanding the whole panel down with that 320, just so that way I can get it a nice blend in here. This piece is all sanded down now. You can look and see that it has that nice dull haze to it. There's a couple of spots you can still see maybe a little bit of shine poking through and just some like little dimples, but I'm not really too worried about that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. This is good enough for my purpose. Basically, I'm just going to be painting, putting my new base coat that I have on that's supposed to match this exact paint color, painting probably about halfway to this panel, about right here, and then I'm going to keep this all factory. Just leave this color, and this would just need clear coat, and then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of blend it in from this area right here, and then I'll go ahead clear coat over the whole thing, and we'll see how it looks like. While I have this epoxy plastic bonder out that I've been using, I do have a couple spots I need to tend to. So this is going to be the front grille piece that goes on the front bumper. This part right here snapped off, so this just goes and tucks in right there. So I'm just going to epoxy this area, and then I also have a spot too as well on this other front bumper piece that I will get right there. And then I have another tab on this front bumper right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit all three of these with some of that epoxy, and hopefully get these pieces back together. I'm getting close to painting. One of the first things that I'm gonna do here is finish some prep work actually on the hood. I was just thinking about it, and I'm missing one thing, and that's going to be putting in the windshield wiper sprayers. Now I did pull these off of the hood on my other car, and that's where this piece comes right here. This is the piece that was on the old existing car. So I'm gonna have to figure out how exactly to mount this in this aftermarket hood, and I'm gonna have to try to either cut out these outlays here, which I'm probably going to do. You can kind of see it's divoted in there, and same thing, there's one also on this side right there. Not sure if you can see it or not, but I'm gonna go ahead also take a look at the back side, because I believe that there should be some cutouts underneath. Also, on the subject of the hood, these are going to be my new hood brackets. I'm not going to use the old blue ones because they're too bent up. These are ones I pulled off of one of my part out cars. So I'm going to be painting these black in color is the plan, and this is just to kind of match the hood and also offset the engine bay. I'm just going to use a scuff pad with these, and that's all I'm going to use. Just go over it, rough it up. Now that we have the hood flipped over, we're going to be starting with the back side. You can see right here, this is the indentation of where the backside of where the wiper sprayer goes through. Same thing over there. I'm going to start by just drilling this out, and then taking a Dremel tool and working my way all the way around this so I can finish it off. I have my first couple of holes that I drilled out so far, so I just did a couple in just this area right here, and same thing over here on this side. So next I'm just going to take this Dremel tool, which is a little bit finer and should be a little bit easier to work with, and round out the rest of this area, and also go into this little groove here. You have to be super careful doing this because it's very easy once you break through to go through that other side. This is how the back side looks right now. I just use one of these little sander type grinder wheels in here and touched up pretty much the area. So right now there's still a little bit of cleaning up to do in here. There's still some loose parts, so I just have a little file pick that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to come in here and clean this up. Then I'll go ahead and move over to the front side. Time to drill out the front side. I have a pretty small drill bit. It's smaller than the size of the hole. I'm not trying to use a big one that's the exact size. I'm going to do this as slow as possible and just be very, very careful with it, drilling right in the middle. And then I'm going to come back with that Dremel tool and clean it up as best as I can. Here's where we're at, guys. After drilling these out using the Dremel tool, using little hand files, I was able to finally get, I just took one of these off of here and test fitted it up. It does go in, and there is a little bit of resistance pushing it in, but that's kind of how you want. You don't want it to fit in super loose, because then it's going to have play and flop all over the place. So I'm not going to push this all the way in right now because it's going to be a pain to get out. But I went ahead and I did test fit this on both sides, and it is able to go into both sides. And again, it does have a little bit of resistance going in. I'm not going to push it in all the way because then it's going to be tough to get out, but they do work. So this took me probably like an hour to do, I would say. Definitely take your time doing it. These aren't the most perfect of cuts, but when these go on, it's going to hide all that anyways, so you're not going to be able to see that. Now, this hood should be completed.